When millionaire Daniel Whitmore walked into his mansion after 3 months away, he never expected his world to shatter with a single glance. The new maid wasn't just any woman. She was Naomi, the love he'd abandoned 9 years ago, and standing beside her was an 8-year-old girl with his exact smile. His mother's icy disapproval filled the room as the devastating truth began to surface. Had his own flesh and blood been living as a stranger under his roof? But Naomi carried secrets darker than Daniel could imagine, secrets about the night he left, about the letter that was never sent, and about the choice that would force him to give up everything he'd ever known. What happened 9 years ago would either destroy 3 lives forever or create the family that was always meant to be. Subscribe and comment below if you believe love can truly conquer all, because this story will test that belief in ways you never saw coming. The black Mercedes rolled up the long gravel driveway just as the sun began to set. Daniel Whitmore pressed his face against the cool window and watched his family's mansion grow larger. 3 months away felt like forever. Business trips always did. He stepped out of the car and stretched his tall frame. The evening air smelled like jasmine and freshly cut grass. Home, finally. "Welcome back, Mr. Whitmore," said James, the butler, taking Daniel's luggage. "Your mother is in the sitting room." Daniel nodded and walked through the heavy oak doors. Everything looked the same. The marble floors still gleamed, the crystal chandelier still sparkled, but something felt different. "Daniel," his mother's voice echoed from down the hall. "Come here this instant." He found Elaine Whitmore sitting in her favorite chair, a cup of tea balanced perfectly in her hands. At 55, she still carried herself like royalty. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her blue eyes were sharp as always. "Mother," Daniel kissed her cheek. "You look well. Sit down. We need to talk." Elaine set down her cup with a soft clink. "I had to let Martha go while you were away." Daniel frowned. Martha had been their housekeeper for 10 years. "What happened?" "She was stealing. Small things at first, but then—" Elaine waved her hand. "I couldn't have it, so I hired someone new." "Without asking me?" "You were in Japan. I had to act quickly." Elaine's voice grew cold. "Though I'm not sure this new girl will work out either." Before Daniel could ask what she meant, soft footsteps sounded in the hallway. A woman appeared in the doorway carrying a silver tray. Daniel looked up, and his world stopped. The tray slipped from her hands. It crashed to the floor with a loud bang. Tea and broken china scattered everywhere. "Naomi?" Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. The woman stood frozen. Her dark skin was smooth as silk. Her black hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. She was older now, but those brown eyes were the same ones that had haunted his dreams for years. "I'm sorry," Naomi said quickly. She dropped to her knees and began picking up the broken pieces. "I'll clean this up right away." "Naomi Carter," Elaine said with ice in her voice. "This is what I meant about the new girl being clumsy." Daniel couldn't move, couldn't speak. Naomi was here, in his house, after 9 years of nothing. "Be careful," he said, rushing to help her. "You'll cut yourself." Naomi looked up at him for just a moment. Her eyes were full of pain and something else. Anger, maybe. "I'm fine, Mr. Whitmore." The way she said his name like he was a stranger cut deep. "Mommy?" A small voice came from the hallway. Daniel turned and saw a little girl peeking around the corner. She had bright brown eyes and curly black hair tied up in 2 ponytails. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. "Lila, go back to the kitchen," Naomi said quickly. But the little girl stepped into the room instead. She looked at the mess on the floor, and then at Daniel. When she smiled, his heart nearly stopped. The smile was his own. The same crooked grin he'd had since he was a boy. The same dimple in her left cheek. "Hi," Lila said to Daniel. "Are you the man who owns this big house?" Daniel stared at her, at the way she tilted her head, at the way her nose crinkled when she smiled. It was like looking in a mirror. "Daniel?" Elaine's sharp voice broke through his thoughts. "Are you all right?" He looked at Naomi. She was watching him with fear in her eyes. Her hands shook as she gathered the last pieces of broken china. "Is she Daniel started to ask, but Naomi cut him off. "Come on, Lila, let's go finish your homework." Naomi stood up with the broken pieces in her hands. She grabbed her daughter's hand and hurried toward the door. "Wait!" Daniel called out, but they were already gone. He stood alone in the sitting room with his mother. His mind raced. Naomi was here, with a daughter who looked exactly like him, a daughter who had to be about 8 years old. 8 years ago, he'd left for business school. 8 years ago, he'd walked away from the best thing that had ever happened to him. "Daniel, sit down." Elaine's voice was firm. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Maybe he had. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He walked the halls of his childhood home and remembered. 9 years ago, Naomi had worked at the small cafe downtown. He'd been 22 and fresh out of college. She'd been 20 and beautiful beyond words. He'd gone to that cafe every morning for coffee. Not because the coffee was good, because she was there. The usual, she would ask with that bright smile. Always, he would say back. It took him 3 months to ask her out. 3 months of morning small talk and stolen glances. When she finally said yes, he felt like the luckiest man alive. They'd spent 6 perfect months together. Picnics in the park, long drives with the windows down, quiet nights talking about everything and nothing. He'd loved her, really loved her, in a way he'd never loved anyone before or since. But then his mother found out. She's not right for you, Elaine had said. Think about your future. Think about our family name. And like a fool, he'd listened. He'd gotten into Harvard Business School and seen it as a way out, a way to avoid making the hard choice, so he'd left. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. Now she was back, in his house, with a daughter who might be his. Daniel stopped walking. He was standing outside the kitchen door. Inside, he could hear soft voices. Is he nice? A small voice asked. Who, baby? That was Naomi. The man with the big house. He seems nice. There was a long pause. I don't know, Lila. We don't really know him. But he helped you pick up the broken cup. That was nice. Another pause. Finish your milk and get ready for bed. Daniel pressed his back against the wall. His heart pounded in his chest. Was Lila his daughter? Had Naomi been pregnant when he left? The thought made him sick and hopeful at the same time. The next morning, Daniel woke up early. He dressed quickly and went downstairs to the kitchen. Naomi was there, making breakfast. She wore a simple blue dress and white apron. Her hair was pulled back like always. Good morning, he said softly. She jumped and turned around. Mr. Whitmore, you're up early. I couldn't sleep. He sat down at the kitchen table. Naomi, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. She cracked eggs into a pan without looking at him. I'm just here to do my job. Your daughter is none of your business. Her voice was sharp as a knife. She looks like me. Naomi's hand stilled on the spatula. Lots of children have brown eyes and dark hair. It's not just that, and you know it. She turned around to face him. Her brown eyes blazed with anger. You think you can just walk back into my life and ask questions? You think you have that right? If she's mine. She's not. The words came out fast and hard. She's mine. Only mine. But Daniel could see the truth in her eyes, in the way her hands shook, in the way she couldn't quite meet his gaze. Mommy! Lila appeared in the doorway. She wore a yellow dress and carried a small backpack. Is breakfast ready? Almost, baby. Naomi's voice went soft and gentle. She turned back to the stove. Lila looked at Daniel and smiled that crooked smile again. Hi, Mr. Houseman. Daniel couldn't help but grin back. Hi there. I'm Daniel. I'm Lila. She climbed up on the chair next to him. I'm 8 years old. How old are you? 31. That's really old, Lila said with wide eyes. Daniel laughed. A real laugh for the first time in years. I guess it is. Lila, eat your breakfast, Naomi said, setting a plate in front of her daughter. She put another plate in front of Daniel without meeting his eyes. Thank you, he said. Naomi just nodded and busied herself at the sink. Do you live here all by yourself? Lila asked between bites of eggs. I live here with my mother, Daniel said, and now with you and your mom. This house is really big. I counted 17 rooms yesterday. 17? Wow. You're a good counter. Lila beamed with pride. I'm really good at math, and reading, and drawing. Do you want to see my drawing? Before Daniel could answer, Lila jumped down from her chair and ran from the room. She came back a minute later with a piece of paper. I drew our new home, she said, spreading the paper on the table. Daniel looked down at the drawing. It showed a big house with lots of windows. In front of the house were 3 stick figures, a woman with long black hair, a little girl with ponytails, and a tall man with a smile. That's me, Lila said, pointing to the little girl. That's Mommy, and that's you. Daniel's throat went tight. You drew me. Uh-huh. You live here too, so you're part of our home picture. Daniel looked up at Naomi. She was staring at the drawing with tears in her eyes. It's beautiful, Lila, Daniel said softly. The best drawing I've ever seen. Lila giggled and hugged the paper to her chest. Can I show it to Grandma Elaine? I don't think that's a good idea, baby, Naomi said quickly. Why not? Naomi looked at Daniel with pleading eyes. He understood. Elaine would not react well to being called Grandma by Naomi's daughter. Maybe later, Daniel said, when she's in a better mood. Okay, Lila shrugged and folded up her drawing. I'm going to put this in my special box. She skipped out of the room, leaving Daniel and Naomi alone. She's amazing, Daniel said. Naomi's face went hard again. She's also not yours to worry about. Naomi, please, just tell me the truth. The truth? Naomi turned to face him fully. The truth is that you left. You disappeared without a word. The truth is that I waited for you. I called and called, but your number was changed. The truth is that I had to figure out how to live without you. I wanted to call, I wanted to come back, but you didn't. Tears filled her eyes. You chose your fancy school and your fancy life. You chose your mother's approval over me. That's not... Don't. Naomi held up her hand. Don't lie to me now, not after all this time. Daniel wanted to explain, wanted to tell her about the pressure from his mother, about how young and scared he'd been, about how he'd regretted leaving every single day since. But before he could say anything, heavy footsteps sounded in the hallway. There you are, Elaine's voice boomed as she entered the kitchen. She wore a perfectly pressed navy dress and pearl necklace. Her eyes went straight to Naomi. I hope you're not bothering my son while he's trying to eat. She's not bothering me, Mother, Daniel said. Good. Elaine poured herself a cup of coffee. Naomi, I need you to dust the library today, and make sure you don't touch my first edition books. Some of them are worth more than you make in a year. Daniel saw Naomi's jaw tighten. Yes, ma'am. Also, that child of yours was running in the hallways yesterday. This is not a playground. Keep her quiet. Lila wasn't bothering anyone, Daniel said. Elaine raised one perfectly shaped eyebrow. Daniel, dear, you've been gone for 3 months. You don't know what's been happening in this house. Then maybe you should tell me. Mother and son stared at each other. The air in the kitchen grew thick with tension. If you'll excuse me, Naomi said quietly. I have work to do. She started to leave, but Daniel caught her arm gently. Wait. Naomi looked down at his hand on her arm. Then she looked up at his face. For just a moment he saw something soft in her eyes, something that looked like the old Naomi, the one who used to love him. Then she pulled away. I really do have work to do, Mr. Whitmore. She left the kitchen, and Daniel felt like she was taking all the air with her. Well, Elaine said, sipping her coffee. That was dramatic. Daniel turned to his mother. We need to talk. About what? About Naomi. About why you really hired her. Elaine set down her cup with a sharp clink. I hired her because she needed work and we needed help. It's that simple. Is it? Daniel, what exactly are you suggesting? He looked at his mother's perfectly calm face. Elaine Whitmore never did anything without a reason. She was the kind of woman who planned 3 moves ahead in every situation. I'm suggesting that you knew exactly who she was when you hired her. Elaine's smile was cold as ice. Of course I knew who she was. I'm not a fool. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Daniel stared at his mother. What do you mean? I mean that girl has been working here for 2 weeks. Her daughter plays in our garden. They sleep in our guest room. And every day, that little girl looks more and more like you when you were her age. Daniel's heart pounded. So, you think... I think, Elaine said slowly, that you have a decision to make. Are you going to let the past stay buried, or are you going to dig it up and deal with the consequences? Before Daniel could answer, light footsteps ran into the kitchen. Mommy! Lila called out. I can't find my backpack. I think you left it by the stairs, baby. Naomi's voice called back from somewhere in the house. Lila spotted Daniel and grinned. Hi, Daniel. Want to help me find my backpack? Daniel looked at his mother's stern face. Then he looked at this beautiful little girl who might be his daughter. The choice was easier than he'd thought it would be. I'd love to help, he said, standing up from the table. Lila grabbed his hand and tugged him toward the door. Her small fingers felt warm and right in his. As they left the kitchen together, Daniel heard his mother call out behind them, Be careful, Daniel. Some things are better left alone. But as Lila chattered happily beside him, Daniel knew it was already too late for that. They found the backpack by the front stairs, just like Naomi had said. Lila swung it onto her shoulders and adjusted the straps. Do you want to walk me to the bus stop? She asked Daniel. I don't think your mum would like that. She's cleaning upstairs. She won't even know. Lila grabbed his hand again. Please? I've never had anyone walk me to the bus stop before. The words hit Daniel like a punch to the chest. This little girl had been walking to the bus stop alone. If she was his daughter, she'd been doing everything alone. Okay, he said, but just this once. Lila's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really, really. They walked down the long driveway together. Lila skipped beside him, pointing out flowers and birds and interesting rocks. She was smart and funny and full of life. My Uncle Marcus says rich people are mean, Lila said as they reached the end of the driveway. But you're not mean at all. Your Uncle Marcus? Mommy's brother. He comes to visit sometimes. He doesn't like big houses or fancy cars. Lila swung their joined hands back and forth. He says people with money think they're better than everyone else. Daniel felt a stab of guilt. Maybe Uncle Marcus wasn't wrong. What do you think? Daniel asked. Lila considered this seriously. I think some people are mean and some people are nice. It doesn't matter if they have money or not. That's very wise. Mommy says I'm wise like my daddy. Lila's voice went quiet. But I don't know my daddy. He went away before I was born. Daniel stopped walking. His heart hammered in his chest. Your mom told you that? Uh-huh. She said he had to go far away for work and couldn't come back. Lila looked up at Daniel with those familiar brown eyes. But maybe someday he will come back. Maybe he's looking for us right now. The yellow school bus rounded the corner before Daniel could respond. Lila waved goodbye and climbed up the big steps. She pressed her face to the window and waved again as the bus drove away. Daniel stood alone at the end of the driveway. His mind raced with questions. When was Lila born? Had Naomi tried to contact him? Had she been pregnant when he left for school? And the biggest question of all, was he the daddy that Lila talked about with such hope in her voice? He walked back to the house with heavy steps. When he opened the front door, he found Naomi standing in the hallway. Her arms were crossed and her face was angry. Where is my daughter? She demanded. I walked her to the bus stop. You had no right to do that. She asked me to. I couldn't say no. Naomi's eyes blazed. You don't get to play daddy, Daniel. Not after 9 years, not when it's convenient for you. I'm not playing anything. I'm trying to understand. Understand what? Whether that little girl is my daughter. The words hung in the air between them. Naomi's face went pale. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. She's not, Naomi said finally. But her voice was quiet now, uncertain. Naomi, please, just tell me the truth. When was she born? Naomi looked away. I can't do this, I have work to do. She started to walk away, but Daniel stepped in front of her. When was she born? He asked again. Naomi's hands shook. Tears filled her eyes. December 15th, 8 years ago. Daniel did the math quickly. If Lila was born in December, she would have been conceived in March. 9 years ago, right around the time he'd left for school. Naomi, it doesn't matter, she said, her voice breaking. She's mine. She's been mine her whole life. You don't get to show up now and claim her. I'm not trying to claim her. I'm trying to understand why you never told me. Told you? Naomi's voice rose. How was I supposed to tell you? You changed your phone number. You never came back. Your mother made it very clear that I wasn't welcome in your world. My mother? What did she do? Naomi laughed, but there was no humor in it. She didn't tell you? Of course she didn't. Tell me what? I came here, Daniel. When I found out I was pregnant, I came to this house and begged to see you. Daniel felt sick. What happened? Your mother told me you were engaged to someone else, someone appropriate. She said you never wanted to see me again. That's not true. I was never engaged. I would never... How was I supposed to know that? Tears ran down Naomi's face. I was 20 years old and pregnant and scared. Your mother offered me money to disappear, to never contact you again. Daniel's world tilted. Did you take it? No. Naomi wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I had too much pride for that, but I got the message loud and clear. You didn't want us. Daniel reached for her, but she stepped back. I can't do this, she said. I can't let you back into our lives just so you can leave again when things get hard. I'm not going anywhere. You say that now. But what happens when your mother threatens to cut you off? What happens when your friends find out you have a black daughter? What happens when the novelty wears off? Naomi, that's not... It is fair. Her voice was firm now, strong, because I won't let you break her heart the way you broke mine. She walked away, leaving Daniel alone in the hallway. He slumped against the wall and put his head in his hands. 9 years ago, he'd made the worst mistake of his life. He'd walked away from love because he was young and scared and stupid. Now he had a chance to make it right, to be the man Naomi deserved, to be the father Lila needed. But first, he had to prove that he'd changed, that he was worthy of their trust, and that was going to be the hardest thing he'd ever done. The next few days passed like a careful dance. Daniel and Naomi moved around each other in the big house, polite but distant. She did her work. He tried to stay out of her way. But every morning Lila would find him and brighten his whole day with her smile. Want to see my rock collection? She asked one morning, dumping a handful of stones on the kitchen table. These are beautiful, Daniel said, examining each one carefully. Where did you find them? In the garden. This one looks like a heart, see? Lila held up a smooth pink stone. And this one looks like a turtle. Daniel smiled. You have a good eye for shapes. Mommy says, I get that from my daddy. She says he was really good at seeing things other people missed. The words made Daniel's chest tight. He looked across the kitchen where Naomi was washing dishes. Her shoulders were tense. Your mommy is very smart, Daniel said softly. She's the smartest person in the whole world, Lila agreed. Then she lowered her voice to a whisper. But sometimes she gets sad when she thinks I'm not looking. Daniel's heart ached. What makes her sad? I think she misses my daddy. Even though she says she doesn't need anybody. Lila picked up the heart-shaped rock and held it tight. I wish he would come home. Before Daniel could respond, Naomi turned around from the sink. Lila, put your rocks away and get ready for school, she said. But Mommy, I was showing Daniel. Now, baby. Lila sighed and scooped up her rocks. She gave Daniel a quick hug before running upstairs. Her small arms around his neck felt like the most natural thing in the world. When they were alone, Naomi sat down across from Daniel at the table. You need to stop, she said quietly. Stop what? Getting close to her. She's starting to get attached. Daniel set down his coffee cup. Would that be so terrible? Yes. Naomi's voice was firm. Because when you leave, she'll be the one who gets hurt. I told you I'm not leaving. Everyone leaves, Daniel. That's what people do. The pain in her voice cut him deep. Not everyone. Not me. Not anymore. Naomi stood up. I have to go to the market today. We're out of milk and bread. I could drive you, Daniel offered. Both of you. We can take the bus. Please, let me help. Naomi hesitated. Daniel could see the war playing out on her face. Pride fighting against practicality. The store is 20 minutes away on the bus, Daniel said gently. In the car, it's 5 minutes, and you could get more groceries if you didn't have to carry them. Finally, Naomi nodded. Fine, but this doesn't mean anything. I understand. An hour later, they were walking through the grocery store together. Lila sat in the shopping cart, pointing out items they needed. Daniel pushed the cart, while Naomi checked things off her list. To anyone watching, they probably looked like a normal family doing normal Saturday shopping. The thought made Daniel's heart race. Can we get the cereal with the cartoon tiger? Lila asked. That cereal has too much sugar, Naomi said. But it tastes so good. How about this one? Daniel picked up a box of honey wheat cereal. It's sweet, but not too sweet. Lila considered this seriously. Okay, but next time can we get the tiger cereal? We'll see, Naomi said, but she was almost smiling. They made their way through the aisles slowly. Daniel found himself studying Naomi when she wasn't looking. She was even more beautiful than he remembered. There was a strength in her now that hadn't been there 9 years ago. Being a mother had changed her, made her fiercer and more sure of herself. Daniel? Lila's voice broke into his thoughts. Why are you staring at my mommy? Both adults froze. Daniel felt his face heat up. I wasn't staring, he said. Yes, you were. You had the same look Uncle Marcus gets when he looks at his girlfriend Sarah. Naomi's cheeks turned pink. Lila, that's enough. What? It's true. Lila grinned. Do you think my mommy is pretty, Daniel? Lila! Naomi's voice was sharp with embarrassment. Daniel looked at Naomi's flushed face and decided to be honest. I think your mommy is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. The words hung in the air between them. Naomi's eyes went wide. For a moment she looked exactly like the girl he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. See, Lila said happily. I told you he was staring. Naomi turned away quickly and grabbed the first thing she saw off the shelf. It happened to be a bag of dog treats. Mommy? Lila said. We don't have a dog. Naomi looked down at the bag in her hands and laughed, a real laugh that lit up her whole face. Daniel felt his heart skip a beat. I guess I wasn't paying attention, she said. You were thinking about Daniel thinking you're pretty, Lila said matter-of-factly. Lila Rose Carter. You are too smart for your own good, Naomi said, but she was still smiling. They finished shopping and loaded the bags into Daniel's car. On the drive home, Lila chattered about everything she saw out the window. Naomi was quiet, but she seemed more relaxed than she had in days. When they pulled into the driveway, a beat-up pickup truck was parked by the front door. Naomi tensed immediately. Oh no. What's wrong? Daniel asked. That's my brother's truck. As if summoned by her words, a man stepped out from behind the truck. He was tall and lean with dark skin and muscles that came from hard work. His face was set in angry lines. Marcus, Naomi said quietly. Uncle Marcus. Lila jumped out of the car and ran to him. He scooped her up in a big hug, but his eyes never left Daniel. "Hey there, baby girl," Marcus said. "How's my favorite niece?" "I'm your only niece," Lila giggled. "That's why you're my favorite." Marcus set her down and walked over to Daniel. "You must be Whitmore." Daniel got out of the car. Marcus was a few inches shorter than him, but something about the way he carried himself made him seem bigger, more dangerous. "Daniel," he said, holding out his hand. Marcus looked at the offered hand for a long moment before shaking it. His grip was firm enough to crack bones. "Interesting meeting you," Marcus said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard as stone. "Real interesting." "Marcus, what are you doing here?" Naomi asked. "Came to check on my sister, make sure she was settling in okay." Marcus looked around at the big house and manicured grounds. "Fancy place." "It's temporary," Naomi said quickly. "Is it?" Marcus's gaze flicked to Daniel. "Seems like some people might want it to be permanent." Daniel felt tension crackling in the air. He could see that Marcus loved his sister and niece fiercely. He was here to protect them. Daniel respected that, even if it made things harder. "Uncle Marcus, want to see my room?" Lila asked. "It's really big, and it has its own bathroom." "In a minute, baby girl." Marcus put his hand on Lila's shoulder, but kept his eyes on Daniel. "First, I need to have a talk with this gentleman." "Marcus, don't," Naomi warned. "It's okay," Daniel said. "Let's talk." Marcus nodded toward the truck. "Privately." They walked away from Naomi and Lila. When they were out of earshot, Marcus turned to face Daniel. "I know who you are," he said. "I figured you might. 9 years ago, you broke my sister's heart. You left her pregnant and alone." Daniel felt the words like physical blows. "I didn't know she was pregnant. Didn't know or didn't want to know. I swear to you I had no idea." Marcus studied his face for a long moment. "Maybe, maybe not. But you know now." "Yes." "So what are you going to do about it?" Daniel thought about all the easy answers he could give, about how complicated the situation was, about how his mother disapproved, about how much time had passed. Instead, he told the truth. "I'm going to try to earn their trust. I'm going to try to be the man they deserve. And if you can't, if it gets too hard or too complicated, what then?" Daniel met Marcus's hard stare. "Then I'll keep trying anyway." Marcus was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded once. "Fair enough, but let me be clear about something." He stepped closer to Daniel. "If you hurt them again, if you make my sister cry one more tear over you, I will make your life very unpleasant. We understand each other?" "We understand each other." "Good." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "Now come on. Lila wants to show me her room, and I want to see where my girls are living." They walked back to Naomi and Lila. Naomi was watching them with worried eyes. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Everything's fine," Marcus said. He ruffled Lila's hair. "Now, where's this fancy room of yours?" They spent the afternoon together. Marcus seemed to relax as he saw how happy Lila was. She showed him every corner of the house, chattering about her new favorite places, and the nice man who lived there too. Daniel found himself liking Marcus despite the tension. He was clearly devoted to his sister and niece. He made Lila laugh with silly jokes and helped her build a fort out of couch cushions. "You're good with her," Daniel said when they were sitting in the garden watching Lila chase butterflies. "She's special," Marcus replied. "Smart as a whip and twice as stubborn as her mama." Naomi laughed. "I heard that. You were supposed to." Marcus grinned. It was the most relaxed Daniel had seen Naomi since he'd been back. Sitting in the afternoon sun with her daughter playing nearby and her brother teasing her, she looked almost happy. "I should probably head home," Marcus said as the sun started to set. "Sarah's making dinner and she gets cranky when I'm late." "Tell her I said hi," Naomi said. Marcus stood up and stretched. Then he turned to Daniel. "Walk me to my truck?" Daniel followed him to the driveway. Marcus opened the driver's door but didn't get in. "She wrote you a letter," he said quietly. "What?" "When she found out she was pregnant. Naomi wrote you a letter. She was going to mail it, but—" Marcus shook his head. "Your mother really did a number on her. Made her believe you wanted nothing to do with her." Daniel's stomach clenched. "Where's the letter now?" "She still has it. Keeps it in that little jewelry box her grandmother gave her." Marcus climbed into his truck. "Maybe someday she'll let you read it." He drove away, leaving Daniel standing alone in the driveway. A letter. Naomi had written him a letter 9 years ago, and he'd never even known it existed. He went back to the house and found Naomi in the kitchen making dinner. Lila was at the table drawing another picture. "Where did Marcus go?" Lila asked. "Home to Sarah," Naomi said. "You'll see him again soon. I like when Uncle Marcus visits. He makes you smile more." Naomi glanced at Daniel. "I smile plenty." Not like when Uncle Marcus is here, or when Daniel helps us with grocery shopping. Lila held up her picture. Look what I drew. This time the picture showed 4 people at a picnic. Daniel recognized himself, Naomi, and Lila. The 4th person had to be Marcus. That's beautiful, baby, Naomi said. It's my family, Lila explained. My mommy and my uncle and Daniel. Daniel's not family, Naomi said gently. But he could be, Lila said, if he wanted to. Right, Daniel? Daniel looked at this little girl who had somehow stolen his heart in just a few days. Then he looked at her mother, who was trying so hard to keep them all at a safe distance. Right, he said softly. That night, after Lila was in bed, Daniel found Naomi in the sitting room. She was reading a book, but he could tell she wasn't really seeing the words. Marcus seems like a good man, Daniel said. He is. He practically raised me after our parents died. Daniel sat down across from her. How old were you? 16. Marcus was 18. Naomi closed her book. He gave up a scholarship to take care of me. Never complained once. That explains why he's so protective. He has reason to be. Naomi's voice was quiet. I haven't always made the best choices. Falling in love with me wasn't a bad choice. Naomi looked up at him. Wasn't it? Before Daniel could answer, a loud crack of thunder shook the house. Rain started pounding against the windows. Mommy! Lila's voice called from upstairs. I'm scared! Naomi jumped up and ran toward the stairs. Daniel followed her. They found Lila sitting up in bed, clutching a stuffed rabbit. It's just a storm, baby, Naomi said, sitting on the edge of the bed. You're safe. Can you stay with me? Lila asked. Of course. Another flash of lightning lit up the room, followed immediately by thunder. Lila squeaked and buried her face in her mother's shoulder. How about we go downstairs? Daniel suggested. We could play a game until the storm passes. Can we? Lila asked hopefully. If your mum says it's okay. Naomi hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but just until the worst of it passes. They went down to the sitting room. Daniel started a fire in the fireplace while Naomi made hot chocolate. Lila found a board game and set it up on the coffee table. This is my favorite game, she said. Uncle Marcus taught me how to play. They played for an hour, laughing when someone landed on the wrong space or drew a silly card. The storm raged outside, but inside they were warm and safe. At some point, Lila curled up on the couch with her head in Naomi's lap. Naomi stroked her daughter's hair gently. Daniel watched them and felt something shift in his chest. This was what he'd been missing. This was what love looked like. Not just the romantic kind, but the deep, everyday love of a family. She's asleep, Naomi whispered. Daniel looked down at Lila's peaceful face. She's beautiful, just like her mother. Naomi's cheeks flushed pink. Daniel, I know you don't want to hear this, but I need to say it. Daniel leaned forward. I never stopped loving you, Naomi. Not for one day in 9 years. You left. I made a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. You chose your mother over me. I was 22 and scared. I thought I was doing what was best for both of us. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. What was best? You think abandoning me was best? No. I think I was a coward who didn't know how to fight for what mattered most. They stared at each other across the small space. The fire crackled softly. Lila slept peacefully between them. I can't do this again, Naomi whispered. I can't let you break my heart twice. I won't, I promise you I won't. You don't know that. When things get hard, when your mother starts pressuring you, when people start talking, Naomi shook her head. You'll choose the easy path again. No, I won't. How can you be so sure? Daniel looked down at Lila's sleeping face. Because now I know what I'm fighting for. The storm was starting to pass. The thunder was getting quieter, the lightning less frequent. I should get her to bed, Naomi said. Daniel stood up. I'll carry her. He lifted Lila gently. She murmured something in her sleep and curled against his chest. His heart nearly burst with the feeling of holding her. Upstairs, he laid her carefully in her bed. Naomi pulled the covers up to her chin and kissed her forehead. Sweet dreams, baby girl, she whispered. In the hallway, Daniel and Naomi stood close together in the dim light, close enough that he could smell her perfume, close enough to see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Thank you, she said softly, for tonight, for making her feel safe. Thank you for letting me. They were standing too close. Daniel knew he should step back, give her space. But Naomi was looking up at him with something soft in her eyes, something that looked like the beginning of hope. Naomi, he whispered. She didn't move away. Instead, she reached up and touched his face gently. Her fingers were warm against his skin. I missed you, she said so quietly he almost didn't hear her. I missed you too, every single day. And then, somehow, they were kissing, soft and sweet, and full of 9 years of longing. Daniel cupped her face in his hands like she was something precious, something that might disappear if he wasn't careful. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "This is complicated," Naomi whispered. "The best things usually are." She stepped back, putting space between them. "I need time to think." "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." Naomi nodded and disappeared into her room. Daniel stood in the hallway for a long time, touching his lips where hers had been. The next few days were the happiest Daniel had been in years. Naomi was still cautious, but she was softer with him. She let him help with little things. She didn't pull away when their hands accidentally touched. Best of all, she let him spend time with Lila. They went to the park on Sunday afternoon. Lila ran straight to the swings, while Daniel and Naomi sat on a nearby bench. "Higher, higher!" Lila called out. Daniel went over and gave her gentle pushes, making her giggle with delight. When she got tired of swinging, they played on the monkey bars and the slide. "Watch this!" Lila called out, hanging upside down from a low bar. "Be careful," Naomi called back. "She's fine," Daniel said. "She's strong. She gets that from her father," Naomi said without thinking. Then she went quiet, realizing what she'd said. Daniel looked at her. "So you admit it?" "I admit nothing," Naomi said, but she was almost smiling. They spent the whole afternoon at the park. When it was time to go, Lila ran over and threw her arms around both of them. "This was the best day ever," she said. "We're like a team." Daniel and Naomi looked at each other over Lila's head. Something passed between them, something that felt like possibility. "Yeah," Daniel said softly. "We are like a team." But their happiness didn't last long. The next morning, Daniel came downstairs to find his mother waiting in the kitchen. She was holding a piece of paper in her hands, and her face was cold as winter. "What's this?" she asked, holding up the paper. Daniel's blood ran cold. It was Lila's drawing, the one showing their family. "Where did you get that?" "I found it in the library. That child left it there." Elaine's voice was sharp. "Daniel, what exactly is going on in this house?" "Nothing that concerns you, Mother." "Doesn't it? That little girl is calling you Daddy in her pictures. That woman is filling her head with fantasies about being part of our family. Maybe she should be part of our family." Elaine's face went white. "You cannot be serious." "I'm completely serious. Daniel, think about what you're saying. Think about our reputation, our social standing." "I don't care about our social standing." "Well, you should." Elaine slammed the paper down on the table. "I will not have that woman and her child destroying everything we've built." "They're not destroying anything. They're what? Your new family?" Elaine's laugh was bitter. "Daniel, you are heir to a fortune. You have responsibilities. You cannot throw your life away on some romantic fantasy." "It's not a fantasy. I love them." "Love!" Elaine spat. "Love doesn't pay bills or maintain estates. Love doesn't preserve family legacies." Daniel stared at his mother, really looked at her for the first time in years. She was beautiful and cold and utterly without mercy. "Is that what you told Naomi 9 years ago?" he asked quietly. Elaine's face didn't change. "I told her the truth, that you had a future to think about. You lied to her. You told her I was engaged. I told her what she needed to hear to protect you from making a terrible mistake." Daniel felt rage building in his chest. "The only terrible mistake I made was listening to you. And now you want to make the same mistake again? Daniel, be reasonable. If you want companionship, there are appropriate women." "Stop." Daniel's voice was deadly quiet. "Just stop." He turned to leave, but Elaine called after him. "If you choose them over your family, you'll lose everything. Is she really worth that much to you?" Daniel paused in the doorway. "She's worth everything to me." He walked away, leaving his mother standing alone in the kitchen. But the damage was already done. Later that afternoon, he found Naomi packing suitcases in her room. "What are you doing?" he asked. "We're leaving." Naomi didn't look at him. "Tonight? Why? What happened?" "Your mother made things very clear to me this afternoon." Naomi's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she folded Lila's clothes. "She told me exactly what would happen if I stayed." "What did she say?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is that she's right." Naomi finally looked at him. "I was starting to believe in fairy tales again. But that's all this is, Daniel, a fairy tale. That's not true, isn't it? How long before you start resenting us? How long before you realize what you gave up?" "I'm not giving up anything that matters. Your inheritance, your family's approval, your place in society." Naomi shook her head. "You say that now, but But nothing. Naomi, please. Don't do this. Lila appeared in the doorway, holding her stuffed rabbit. Mommy, why are you packing our clothes? Naomi's face crumpled for just a moment before she pulled herself together. We're going to stay with Uncle Marcus for a while, baby. But I like it here. I like my big room and the garden and... Lila looked at Daniel with confused eyes. I like Daniel. I know, sweetheart. But sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do. Daniel knelt down so he was eye level with Lila. Hey there, little artist. Are we leaving because of something I did? Lila asked in a small voice. No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Daniel's voice was thick with emotion. You're perfect just the way you are. Then why can't we stay? Daniel looked up at Naomi. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Sometimes grown-ups make things complicated, Daniel said. But I want you to know something, okay? You and your mommy mean everything to me. Everything. Lila threw her arms around his neck. I love you, Daniel. The words hit him like a punch to the chest. I love you too, little one, so much. When Lila let go, Daniel stood up and faced Naomi. Please don't do this, he said quietly. Stay. Fight for us. I can't. Naomi wiped her eyes. I won't put Lila through this. I won't let her get attached to something we can't have. We can have it. We can have everything. At what cost? Your mother will never accept us. Your friends will never approve. And eventually you'll start to see us the way they do. Never. You don't know that, and I can't take that chance. Not with her heart. Daniel wanted to argue more, wanted to make her see that they could overcome anything together. But looking at Lila's confused face and Naomi's determined expression, he knew it was too late. The fairy tale was over before it had really begun. Daniel woke up at dawn to complete silence. Something felt wrong. The house was too quiet, like it was holding its breath. He got dressed quickly and went to check on Naomi and Lila. Their room was empty. The beds were made. All their clothes were gone. They had left in the night, just like Naomi said they would. Daniel ran downstairs and out to the driveway. No sign of them anywhere. He pulled out his phone and called Naomi's number. It went straight to voicemail. Please, he said to the recording, just tell me where you are. Tell me you're safe. He tried 3 more times. Each call went to voicemail. Daniel went back inside and found his mother in the kitchen, calmly drinking her morning coffee. They're gone, he said. Yes, I know. Elaine didn't look up from her newspaper. You drove them away. I protected you from making a terrible mistake. Daniel stared at his mother, this woman who had raised him, who had taught him about responsibility and duty and family honor. For the first time in his life, he saw her clearly. You're wrong, he said quietly. The terrible mistake was listening to you. Elaine looked up then. Daniel, you're upset. When you calm down, you'll see that I did what was best. Best for who? For me? Or for your idea of what my life should look like? For our family, for our legacy? Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. What legacy, Mother? Money? A big house? Empty rooms and cold hearts? Don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being honest. For the first time in my life, Daniel sat down across from her. Do you know what Lila called me yesterday? Elaine's face tightened. I don't want to hear about that child. She called me Daddy. And for 5 minutes, I knew what it felt like to have a family that actually loved each other. Love doesn't last, Daniel. Money does, status does, security does. You're wrong. Daniel stood up. Love is the only thing that lasts. Everything else is just stuff. He started to walk away, but Elaine's voice stopped him. If you go after them, you're no son of mine. Daniel turned around. His mother was sitting perfectly straight in her chair. Her face was cold as marble. Then I guess I'm not your son, he said. Daniel drove to Marcus's apartment complex on the other side of town. It was a modest place with small balconies and a playground in the courtyard. Nothing like the mansion he'd grown up in, but it felt more like home than his house ever had. He knocked on Marcus's door. When it opened, Marcus filled the doorway like a wall. She doesn't want to see you, Marcus said. Is she okay? Is Lila okay? They're fine. No thanks to you. Daniel ran his hands through his hair. Marcus, please, I need to talk to her. You had your chance to talk. You blew it. My mother lied to her. She made threats. And what did you do to stop her? Marcus crossed his arms. Did you stand up to the old lady? Did you choose your family or hers? Daniel's shoulders sagged. I tried. Trying isn't good enough. Not when it comes to them. Then tell me what is good enough. Tell me how to fix this. Marcus studied him for a long moment. You really don't know, do you? Know what? How to fight for something that matters. Before Daniel could respond, a small voice came from inside the apartment. Uncle Marcus, who's at the door? Daniel's heart jumped. Lila was so close, just a few feet away. "Nobody, baby girl," Marcus called back. "Go help your mama with breakfast." "Is it Daniel?" Lila asked hopefully. "I thought I heard his voice." Marcus's face softened. "No, sweetheart, it's not Daniel." Daniel heard small footsteps running away. The sound broke his heart. "She keeps asking about you," Marcus said quietly. "Keeps wondering why you didn't come to say goodbye." "Because I didn't know they were leaving." "Because your sister snuck out in the middle of the night." "Can you blame her? Your mother made it pretty clear what would happen if she stayed." Daniel leaned against the doorframe. "What did my mother say to her?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "She told Naomi that you would never choose them over your inheritance, that eventually you'd get tired of playing house with the help." Daniel felt sick. "I would never." "Wouldn't you? When your rich friends start talking, when you realize what you gave up?" Marcus shook his head. "Naomi's been hurt before, Daniel. She's not going to risk it again unless she knows for sure." "Knows what for sure?" "That you're all in. That when things get hard, you won't run." Marcus started to close the door, but Daniel put his hand up to stop it. "Wait, please. I need to see them. Then prove it." "How?" Marcus looked him up and down. "You drive a car that costs more than most people make in 2 years. You wear shirts that cost more than my rent. You live in a house with 17 rooms. He stepped closer to Daniel. "But what have you ever sacrificed for love?" The door closed with a soft click, leaving Daniel alone in the hallway. Daniel spent the next 3 days trying to figure out how to prove himself. He called Naomi's phone every few hours, but she never answered. He sent text messages that went unanswered. He even tried sending flowers, but Marcus sent them back. On the 4th day, Daniel was sitting in his car outside Marcus's apartment complex when he saw something that made his heart stop. Lila was on the playground with 2 other children. She was on the swings, but she wasn't smiling. She looked sad and small and lost. Daniel got out of his car and walked over to the fence around the playground. He wasn't going to go in. He just wanted to see her, to make sure she was okay. But Lila spotted him immediately. "Daniel!" she cried out, jumping off the swing. She ran to the fence and pressed her face against the chain link. "I missed you so much," she said. "Why didn't you come say goodbye?" Daniel knelt down so they were eye level. "I didn't know you were leaving, little artist. If I had known, nothing could have kept me from saying goodbye. Mommy said we had to go because we don't belong in big houses." Daniel's throat tightened. "You belong wherever you're loved. And I love you very much. I love you too. When are we coming home?" The question hit Daniel like a punch. Home. Lila thought of his house as home. "I don't know, sweetheart. That's up to your mommy. She cries at night when she thinks I'm sleeping," Lila whispered. "I think she misses you too." Before Daniel could respond, he heard angry footsteps behind him. "Get away from my daughter." He turned around to find Naomi walking toward them. Her face was furious, but her eyes looked tired and sad. "Naomi, I don't care what you were doing. Stay away from us." "Mommy, don't be mean to Daniel," Lila said through the fence. "He loves us. Love isn't enough, baby." Naomi's voice was gentle with her daughter, but cold when she looked at Daniel. "Come on, let's go home." "This isn't home," Lila said sadly. "Uncle Marcus's couch isn't as comfortable as my big bed, and there's no garden to play in." Daniel saw Naomi's face crumple for just a moment before she pulled herself together. "We'll get our own place soon," she said. "Just you and me." "But what about Daniel? What if he gets lonely in that big house all by himself?" Naomi looked at Daniel then, really looked at him. He could see the war playing out on her face, love fighting against fear. "He'll be fine," she said finally. "Rich people are always fine." She took Lila's hand and led her away. But just before they disappeared around the corner, Lila turned and waved. Daniel waved back until they were gone. That night, Daniel sat in his empty house and thought about what Marcus had said. What had he ever sacrificed for love? What had he ever given up that really mattered? The answer was nothing. He'd lived his whole life taking the easy path, doing what was expected, following his mother's plan for his perfect life. But what was the point of a perfect life if it was perfectly empty? The next morning, Daniel made a decision. He called his lawyer and his accountant. He spent hours on the phone, setting things in motion that couldn't be undone. Then he called his mother. "I need to see you," he said. "Of course, dear, I'm in the sitting room." Daniel found her exactly where she always was. Same chair, same cup of tea, same cold smile. "I have something to tell you," he said. "Oh, what's that?" "I'm giving away my inheritance." Elaine went very still. "I beg your pardon?" "I'm setting up a trust fund for children's education, low-income families who can't afford college." Daniel sat down across from her. "The lawyers are drawing up the papers now." "You can't be serious." I'm completely serious. The house, the investments, the family money, it's all going to help kids who need it. Elaine's face went white. Daniel, you're having some sort of breakdown. This is about that woman and her child, isn't it? This is about me finally understanding what matters. Money matters. Security matters. No, Mother. Love matters. Family matters. And I don't mean the kind of family we've been. I mean real family. The kind that supports each other instead of tearing each other down. Elaine stood up, her hands shaking with rage. I forbid this. I absolutely forbid it. You can't forbid anything. It's my inheritance, and I can do whatever I want with it. Then you're a fool. Daniel smiled sadly. Maybe. But I'm a fool who might finally have a chance at happiness. He left his mother sitting alone in her perfect, empty sitting room. The next morning, Daniel drove to Marcus's apartment complex again. But this time he wasn't there to see Naomi or Lila. He was there to see Marcus. He found him in the parking lot, trying to fix his beat-up pickup truck. The hood was up, and Marcus was bent over the engine, muttering under his breath. Need help? Daniel asked. Marcus looked up, surprised. What are you doing here? Offering to help. I don't need help from you. Daniel took off his expensive jacket and rolled up his sleeves. What's wrong with it? Transmission's shot. Has been for months. Marcus wiped his hands on a dirty rag. Can't afford to fix it right now. Mind if I take a look? Marcus hesitated, then stepped aside. Daniel leaned over the engine. He wasn't a mechanic, but he'd learned a few things in college when money was tight, and he couldn't always afford to pay someone else. Try starting it now, Daniel said after a few minutes. Marcus got in and turned the key. The engine coughed and sputtered, then caught. It wasn't perfect, but it was running. How did you... Marcus stared at the engine in disbelief. It wasn't the transmission, just a loose connection. Daniel wiped his hands on his shirt, leaving grease stains on the white fabric. It should get you through for a while, but you'll need to have it looked at properly. Marcus shut off the engine and got out of the truck. Why did you do that? Because you needed help. That's not what I mean, and you know it. Daniel met his eyes. Because I want to prove that I'm not going anywhere, that I'll do whatever it takes to be part of their lives. Even if it means getting your hands dirty. Daniel looked down at his stained shirt and smiled. Especially if it means getting my hands dirty. Marcus nodded slowly. All right, but fixing my truck doesn't fix the real problem. What's the real problem? My sister is scared. She's been hurt before, and she's terrified of being hurt again. Marcus leaned against his truck. Words won't convince her. Money won't convince her. You want her to trust you? Show her that you'll choose her when it costs you something. How? That's for you to figure out. It took Daniel 2 more days to work up the courage for what he had to do. When he finally knocked on Marcus's door again, his hands were shaking. Marcus opened the door and looked him up and down. Daniel was wearing old jeans and a t-shirt, no expensive watch, no designer shoes, just a man asking for a chance. She's in the kitchen with Lila, Marcus said finally. But if you make her cry, I'm throwing you out personally. Daniel nodded and walked into the small apartment. He could hear Naomi and Lila talking quietly in the kitchen. His heart pounded as he approached the doorway. Naomi was sitting at a tiny table, helping Lila with homework. When she saw Daniel, she went very still. What are you doing here? She asked. I came to talk to you. We have nothing to talk about. Daniel! Lila jumped up from her chair and ran to him. I came to visit. Daniel hugged her tight, breathing in the sweet smell of her hair. Hi there, little artist. I drew you another picture. Want to see? Lila, go play in Uncle Marcus's room for a few minutes, Naomi said. But I want to show Daniel my picture. Later, baby, I promise. Lila looked disappointed, but she obeyed her mother. When they were alone, Naomi crossed her arms and stared at Daniel. You need to stop coming here. You're confusing her. I'm not here to confuse anyone. I'm here to tell you that I gave it all away. Gave what away? Everything. My inheritance, the house, all of it. I signed the papers yesterday. Naomi's face went pale. You're lying. I'm not. Daniel pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to her. It's all going to a trust fund for kids who need help with college. Naomi read the legal document with wide eyes. Daniel, this is millions of dollars. I know. You gave it all away? Every penny. Why? Daniel sat down across from her at the small table. Because Marcus was right. I've never sacrificed anything for love. I've never proven that I'm willing to choose what matters over what's easy. So you chose us. I chose love. I chose the chance to be the man you and Lila deserve. Tears filled Naomi's eyes. Daniel, you didn't have to do this. Yes, I did. I had to show you that I'm all in. that there's no amount of money or pressure from my mother that would make me walk away again. But your security, your future. My future is sitting right here. Daniel reached across the table and took her hands. If you'll have me. Naomi was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I'm so scared. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I gave you reason to be scared. What if your mother cuts you off completely? She already has. I'm not welcome in that house anymore. What if your friends reject you? Then they weren't really friends. What if people stare at us? What if they whisper? Daniel squeezed her hands. Then let them stare. Let them whisper. I don't care about any of that. Naomi pulled her hands away and stood up. She walked to the small window and looked out at the parking lot. You don't understand what it's like, she said quietly, being the outsider, being the one who doesn't belong. Then teach me. She turned around. What? Teach me what it's like. Help me understand. We'll figure it out together. It won't be easy. The best things never are. Naomi was quiet for a long time. Daniel held his breath, waiting for her answer. Finally, she spoke. There's something I need to tell you. Okay. About Lila. About her father. Daniel's heart stopped. What about him? Naomi took a shaky breath. She is your daughter, Daniel. She's always been your daughter. The words hit Daniel like lightning. Even though he'd suspected it, even though he'd hoped it, hearing it out loud changed everything. Are you sure? I'm sure. She was born exactly 9 months after you left. She has your eyes, your smile, your stubborn streak. Naomi wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I've been lying to myself as much as to you. Daniel stood up on shaky legs. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I was angry. Because I was hurt. Because I was terrified that if you knew the truth, you'd try to take her away from me. I would never. I know that now. But 9 years ago, I was 20, and scared, and alone. Your mother had convinced me that you wanted nothing to do with us. Daniel walked over to where Naomi stood by the window. Can I hug you? She nodded, and he pulled her into his arms. She felt so small and fragile against his chest. He could feel her heart racing. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. You're here now, she whispered back. That's what matters. They held each other for a long time. Outside, Daniel could hear children playing in the courtyard. Inside, he could hear Lila singing softly to herself in the other room. His daughter, Lila, was his daughter. Can I tell her? He asked. Naomi pulled back to look at him. Are you sure? Once you tell her, there's no going back. I'm sure. I want her to know that she has a daddy who loves her more than anything in the world. Naomi smiled through her tears. She's going to be so happy. They called Lila into the room. She came running with her picture in her hands. Look, Daniel, I drew you a new picture. This one showed 3 people holding hands in front of a small house. There were flowers in the yard and a big tree with a swing. It's beautiful, Daniel said, kneeling down to her level. Lila, your mama and I need to tell you something important. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble. Daniel looked at Naomi, who nodded encouragingly. Do you remember how you said you wished your daddy would come home? Uh-huh. Well, he did come home. I'm your daddy, Lila. Lila stared at him with wide eyes. Really? Really? But I thought my daddy went far away. I did go far away, and it was the biggest mistake I ever made. But I'm back now, and I'm never leaving again. Lila's face broke into the biggest smile Daniel had ever seen. She threw herself into his arms. I knew it, she said. I knew you were my daddy. You have the same crooked smile as me. Daniel held his daughter tight, tears streaming down his face. I love you so much, little artist. I love you too, Daddy. The word hit Daniel like a physical force. Daddy. He was somebody's daddy. Lila pulled back and looked at both her parents. Does this mean we're a real family now? We've always been a real family, Naomi said softly. We just didn't all know it yet. Can we go home now? To the big house with the garden? Daniel and Naomi looked at each other. There were still so many things to work out, so many problems to solve. I don't live in that house anymore, Daniel said. I gave it away. Where do you live now? I don't know yet. I was hoping maybe you and your mama could help me find a new home. Lila clapped her hands together. Can we get a house with a swing in the backyard and a dog, and a big kitchen where we can make pancakes on Sunday mornings? Daniel laughed. We can get whatever you want, as long as we're all together. Promise? Daniel looked at his daughter and then at the woman he'd never stopped loving. I promise. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Marcus went to answer it, and Daniel heard a familiar voice in the hallway. I'm looking for my son. Daniel's blood went cold. His mother was here, Elaine Whitmore walked into the small apartment like she owned it. She wore a black dress and carried herself like a queen. But when she saw Daniel sitting on the floor with Lila in his lap, something in her face shifted. "Daniel," she said quietly. "Mother." Elaine looked around the modest apartment, at Marcus standing protectively by the door, at Naomi holding her head high despite everything, at Lila, who was watching this strange woman with curious eyes. "I came to ask you to come home," Elaine said. "This is my home now." Elaine was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked directly at Lila. "You must be Lila." Lila nodded shyly. "Are you Daniel's mummy?" "I am." "Are you mad at him?" The question seemed to catch Elaine off guard. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you look sad, and you're talking in your quiet voice like grown-ups do when they're upset." Elaine stared at this little girl who had her son's eyes and her son's fearless honesty. "I was upset," she said slowly, "but maybe I was wrong to be upset." "It's okay," Lila said kindly. "Sometimes I get upset when I shouldn't too. Mommy says it's because feelings are complicated." "Your mommy is very smart." Lila beamed with pride. "She's the smartest mommy in the whole world, and Daniel is the best daddy ever." "Daddy!" Elaine's voice was barely a whisper. Daniel stood up, still holding Lila. "Mother, I'd like you to meet your granddaughter." Elaine's composure finally cracked. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at Lila's sweet face. "Hello, sweetheart," she said softly. "Hello," Lila said. "Do you want to see the picture I drew of our family?" She wiggled out of Daniel's arms and ran to get her drawing. Elaine looked at it for a long time. "It's a beautiful family," she said finally. "Want to be in the next picture?" Lila asked. "I could draw you too." Elaine looked at Daniel, then at Naomi, then back at this precious little girl who was willing to include a stranger in her family picture. "I would be honored," she said. Later that evening, after Elaine had gone home with promises to return soon, Daniel and Naomi sat on Marcus's small couch. Lila had fallen asleep between them, her head on Daniel's lap and her feet tucked under Naomi's legs. "She's perfect," Daniel whispered, stroking Lila's hair. "She gets that from her daddy," Naomi said softly. Daniel looked at her. "We're really going to do this? Be a family?" "If you want to. I want to, more than anything." Daniel reached over and took Naomi's hand. "Will you marry me?" Naomi's eyes went wide. "Daniel, I know it's crazy. I know we have a lot to figure out, but I love you, Naomi. I've loved you for 9 years, and I'll love you for 90 more. What about the practical things? Money, a place to live? We'll figure it out. Together." Daniel squeezed her hand. "I don't need a mansion or a fortune, I just need you and Lila." Naomi looked down at their sleeping daughter. "What do you think, baby girl? Should Mommy marry Daddy?" Lila stirred in her sleep and smiled. "Yes, please," she mumbled without opening her eyes. Naomi laughed through her tears. "I guess that settles it. Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." Daniel leaned over Lila and kissed Naomi softly. It was a kiss full of promises and hope, and the kind of love that could overcome anything. When they broke apart, Lila opened one eye and grinned at them. "Are we going to live happily ever after now?" she asked. Daniel looked at his daughter and the woman who had given him everything that mattered. "Yes, little artist," he said, "we're going to live happily ever after." And for the first time in 9 years, Daniel Whitmore knew exactly what home felt like. 3 months later, Daniel woke up to the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. He smiled and stretched in the small bed in Marcus's guest room. For 3 months, he'd been sleeping on a narrow cot, while Naomi and Lila shared the pull-out sofa. It wasn't comfortable, but he'd never been happier. He got dressed quickly and followed the sounds of his family making breakfast. "Daddy!" Lila ran to him when he appeared in the doorway. "Guess what? Uncle Marcus is going to teach me how to change a tire today." "Is he now?" Daniel grinned and scooped her up. "That's a very important skill. Sarah says all strong women should know how to fix things themselves," Lila announced proudly. Daniel looked over at Naomi, who was flipping pancakes at the stove. She was wearing one of his old t-shirts and had flour in her hair. She'd never looked more beautiful. "Morning, gorgeous," he said, kissing her cheek. "Morning yourself," she said, leaning into him. "Sleep okay on that tiny bed?" "Like a baby." It wasn't entirely true. The cot was uncomfortable and too short for his tall frame, but he didn't care. He would have slept on the floor if it meant waking up to this every morning. "I have good news," Daniel said, sitting down at the small table. "I found us a house." Naomi turned around, spatula in hand. "Really? Where?" "About 10 minutes from here. 3 bedrooms, big backyard, and the kitchen has enough space for Sunday morning pancakes." Lila clapped her hands together. "Does it have a swing?" "Not yet, but there's a perfect tree for one." When can we see it? Naomi asked. This afternoon, if you want. The landlord said we could move in next week if we like it. Naomi set down the spatula and walked over to him. Daniel, can we afford it? I mean, I'm working, but it's just part-time cleaning jobs. Daniel had found work too, fixing cars at a small garage downtown. It didn't pay much, but it was honest work and he was good with his hands. More importantly, it was his work, not his mother's money or his family's name. Just him, earning a living for his family. We can afford it, he said confidently. It won't be fancy, but it'll be ours. Our very own house, Lila said dreamily, with our very own rooms and our very own yard. Speaking of our very own, Daniel said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. I have something for you, Lila. Lila's eyes went wide. What is it? Open it and see. Inside the box was a small gold necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. It's beautiful, Lila breathed. What's it for? It's a promise, Daniel said, taking the necklace out of the box. A promise that I'll always be your daddy, no matter what, even when you're all grown up with kids of your own. Lila threw her arms around his neck. I love it, Daddy, and I love you. I love you too, little artist. Daniel fastened the necklace around Lila's neck. She ran to look at herself in the hall mirror, touching the pendant gently. Now everyone will know I have the best daddy in the world, she said. That afternoon they went to look at the house. It was a small blue cottage with white shutters and a front porch. The yard was full of dandelions and needed work, but Lila fell in love with it immediately. Look, Daddy, there's the perfect tree for my swing. She ran to a big oak tree in the backyard and looked up at its strong branches. And look at this, she called out, pointing to a small garden patch near the back fence. We could grow flowers and maybe vegetables. Daniel and Naomi walked through the house hand in hand. It was simple but clean. 3 small bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living room with a fireplace, and a kitchen with yellow walls and white cabinets. What do you think? Daniel asked. I think it's perfect, Naomi said softly. It feels like home already, even without marble floors and crystal chandeliers? Naomi smiled. Especially without marble floors and crystal chandeliers. They signed the lease that day, their first real home together. Moving day was chaos. Marcus and Sarah helped them load their few possessions into Marcus's truck. Daniel's mother showed up unexpectedly, bringing boxes of household items. Every home needs dishes and linens, Elaine said briskly, carrying in a box of towels. She'd been trying, Daniel could see that. She still didn't entirely understand his choices, but she was making an effort for Lila's sake, and slowly, Lila was working her magic on her grandmother's heart. Grandma, Elaine! Lila ran up to her. Want to see my new room? I'd love to, Elaine said, allowing herself to be dragged upstairs by her granddaughter. Daniel found them later in Lila's room. Elaine was sitting on the small bed, while Lila showed her the drawings she'd taped to the walls. This one is our old house, Lila explained, pointing to a picture of the mansion, and this one is our new house. See, it's smaller, but it has more love in it. Elaine's eyes were soft as she looked at the drawing. How can you tell it has more love? Because everyone who lives here chose to be here. In the big house, some people were there because they had to be, not because they wanted to be. Out of the mouths of babes, Daniel thought. His 8-year-old daughter understood something it had taken him 31 years to learn. Lila, Elaine said carefully, would you like me to visit sometimes? I could bring books to read together, or we could bake cookies. Really? Lila's face lit up. You want to be part of our family? If you'll have me. Lila hugged her grandmother tightly. Of course, families should stick together. Daniel watched from the doorway as his mother closed her eyes and held his daughter close. Maybe it wasn't too late for all of them to learn how to be a real family. That night, after everyone had gone home and Lila was asleep in her new room, Daniel and Naomi sat on their front porch swing. Daniel had hung it from the porch ceiling that afternoon, and it was the perfect spot to watch the sunset. I can't believe this is real, Naomi said, curled up against his side. What part? All of it. This house, us being together, Lila having her daddy. Naomi looked up at him. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and find out it was all a dream. Daniel tightened his arms around her. It's not a dream. This is our life now. Your mother seems to be coming around. Lila has that effect on people. She makes it impossible not to love her. She gets that from her daddy too. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of their new neighborhood, kids playing in nearby yards, dogs barking, the distant sound of someone mowing their lawn. It was so different from the silent grandeur of the mansion. Daniel? Naomi's voice was quiet. Do you ever regret it? Giving up all that money? Never. Not for 1 second. But you could have had anything you wanted. I did have anything I wanted. I had everything I wanted. Daniel tilted her face up to look at him. You and Lila are worth more than all the money in the world. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Don't be scared. We're going to make this work. How can you be so sure? Daniel smiled and kissed her forehead. Because we choose each other every day. That's what real love is. Not some fairy tale magic, but choosing to stay and fight and build something beautiful together. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Daniel worked at the garage during the day, while Naomi took care of their home and picked up cleaning jobs when she could. Lila started at a new school and made friends quickly. Every evening they had dinner together at their small kitchen table. Daniel helped Lila with her homework while Naomi cleaned up. Then they would all sit in the living room, reading or watching TV or playing games. It was simple. It was ordinary. It was everything Daniel had never known he wanted. One evening, Lila came home from school with a special assignment. We have to write about our family for the school family night, she announced, and then we get to read it out loud to everyone. That sounds wonderful, baby, Naomi said. What are you going to write about? About how Daddy came home and made our family complete. Daniel's throat got tight. Lila, you don't have to write about me if you don't want to. Some of the other families might not understand. Understand what? Daniel looked at Naomi for help. They'd talked about this, how some people might not approve of their mixed family, how there might be whispers or stares. Some people might think it's strange that your daddy is white and your mommy is black, Naomi said gently. Lila considered this seriously. That's silly. Love doesn't have colors. Some people don't understand that, sweetheart. Then I'll help them understand, Lila said brightly. I'll tell them that love is what makes a family, not what people look like. Daniel scooped her up and spun her around. You know what, little artist? You're absolutely right. Family night at Lila's school was packed. Daniel felt nervous as they walked into the crowded auditorium. Some people did stare, some whispered, but Lila held both her parents' hands proudly and smiled at everyone she passed. They found seats near the back. When it was Lila's turn, she walked up to the microphone with her paper in her hands. My name is Lila Carter, and this is about my family, she began in a clear voice. For most of my life, my family was me and my mommy and my Uncle Marcus. My mommy worked really hard to take care of me, and she was the best mommy ever, but I always wondered about my daddy. Then one day, my daddy came home. He'd been lost for a long time, but he found his way back to us. Some grown-ups made mistakes and said mean things, but love won in the end, because love always wins. My daddy gave up a big house and lots of money to be with me and mommy. He says we're worth more than all the money in the world. My mommy cries happy tears now instead of sad ones. We live in a little blue house with a swing in the backyard. My daddy pushes me on the swing every day after work. My mommy makes the best pancakes on Sunday mornings. And my grandma Elaine is learning how to be part of our family too. Some people think we look different from each other, but I don't see different colors when I look at my family. I just see love. Love doesn't have colors or sizes or shapes. It just is. My family isn't perfect, but it's perfect for us. And that's all that matters. The auditorium was completely silent when Lila finished reading. Then slowly, people started to clap. The applause grew louder and louder until everyone in the room was standing and clapping. Daniel felt tears streaming down his face. His 8-year-old daughter had just taught a room full of adults what family really meant. When Lila came back to their seats, Daniel and Naomi both hugged her tight. I'm so proud of you, Daniel whispered. Did I do good, Daddy? You did perfect, little artist. Absolutely perfect. After the program, several parents came up to introduce themselves. The school principal shook Daniel's hand and invited them to join the PTA. A few families asked if Lila would like to come to birthday parties. As they walked to their car, Daniel felt lighter than he had in months. This was their community now. These were their people. Daddy, Lila said as Daniel buckled her into her car seat. Yes, sweetheart? Are you happy we're a family now? Daniel looked at his daughter's sweet face in the dim light of the parking lot. I'm happier than I've ever been in my whole life. Good, because I have something important to ask you. What's that? When are you and Mommy going to get married? Daniel nearly choked. Well, we talked about it. Because I think you should get married soon, like really soon. Naomi leaned over from the front seat. Why's that, baby? Because Sarah says when two people love each other and live together and have a kid together, they should make it official. Plus, I want to wear a fancy dress and throw flowers. Daniel and Naomi looked at each other and burst out laughing. You know what, Lila? Daniel said. I think you're absolutely right. They planned the wedding for the following month. Nothing fancy, just a simple ceremony in their backyard with their closest friends and family. Elaine insisted on paying for Lila's dress and the flowers. Every little girl should have a princess dress for her parents' wedding, she said firmly. Sarah helped Naomi find a beautiful white dress at a consignment shop. Marcus offered to walk her down the aisle. The garage owner where Daniel worked, a kind man named Joe, agreed to officiate the ceremony. The morning of the wedding, Daniel woke up in Marcus's apartment. He'd spent the night there so Naomi could get ready at the house without him seeing her dress. "You nervous?" Marcus asked, adjusting Daniel's tie. "Terrified," Daniel admitted. "Good. That means it matters." Marcus looked at him seriously. "I want you to know something. When Naomi was pregnant and scared and alone, I wanted to hunt you down and beat you senseless. I wouldn't have blamed you. But watching you these past few months, the way you've fought for them, the way you've changed your whole life for them, I respect that. I respect you." Marcus held out his hand. "Welcome to the family, brother." Daniel shook his hand, feeling the acceptance he'd worked so hard to earn. An hour later, Daniel stood under the oak tree in their backyard. White flowers were strung between the branches, and folding chairs were set up on the grass. It wasn't the mansion's grand ballroom, but it was perfect. Joe opened his book and smiled at the small group gathered there. "We're here today to celebrate love, the kind of love that overcomes obstacles and chooses hope over fear." Music started playing from Marcus's old boombox, and Lila appeared around the corner of the house. She wore a pale pink dress and had flowers in her hair. She carried a basket of rose petals, throwing them on the grass as she walked. "That's my daughter," Daniel whispered to Marcus, unable to hide his pride. "Yeah," Marcus whispered back. "She is." Then Naomi appeared, and Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Her dress was simple but elegant, and she'd never looked more beautiful. She walked toward him with tears of joy in her eyes. When she reached him, Daniel took her hands. "You look amazing," he whispered. "So do you." Joe began the ceremony. "Daniel, do you take Naomi to be your wife? To love her in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer?" "I do," Daniel said firmly. "I absolutely do." "Naomi, do you take Daniel to be your husband? To love him in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer?" "I do," Naomi said, her voice strong and sure. "The rings, please." Lila stepped forward with the rings tied to a small pillow with ribbon. Daniel slipped Naomi's ring onto her finger, and she did the same for him. "By the power vested in me," Joe said with a big smile, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Daniel, you may kiss your bride." Daniel cupped Naomi's face gently and kissed her as their family and friends cheered. When they broke apart, Lila launched herself at them both. "We're really married now," she shouted. "We're really a family." "We were always a family, little artist," Daniel said, lifting her up. "Now it's just official." That night, after the guests had gone home and Lila was asleep in her room, Daniel and Naomi sat on their porch swing as husband and wife. "Mrs. Whitmore," Daniel said, trying out the name. "Actually," Naomi said with a smile, "I was thinking I'd like to be Mrs. Carter Whitmore. I want to keep my name too." "I love that." They rocked gently in the swing, listening to the crickets chirp in their garden. "Daniel," Naomi said quietly. "Yeah, thank you." "For what? For coming home, for fighting for us, for choosing love?" Daniel kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for being worth it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Their house was small and their budget was tight, but they had everything that mattered: love, trust, family. A week later, Daniel was pushing Lila on her new swing when she asked him a question that made his heart skip. "Daddy, do you think I could have a baby brother or sister someday?" Daniel nearly fell over. That's something you'd have to ask your mum about." "I already did. She said it was up to you and her together." "Did she now?" "Uh-huh. She also said babies are a lot of work, but they're worth it." Lila pumped her legs to go higher on the swing. "I think I'd be a good big sister. I think you'd be the best big sister in the world." That night, Daniel and Naomi talked about expanding their family. A year later, they welcomed a son, a perfect little boy with Naomi's dark skin and Daniel's brown eyes. Lila was indeed the best big sister in the world. She helped with diaper changes and bottle feedings. She sang lullabies and read picture books. When anyone asked, she proudly announced, "This is my baby brother and I'm teaching him how to be part of our family." Elaine was a doting grandmother to both children. She visited every week, bringing books and toys and stories about Daniel when he was little. She never mentioned the mansion or the money Daniel had given up. She seemed to understand that her son had found something worth far more than wealth. Marcus and Sarah got married the following spring. Marcus started his own car repair business and asked Daniel to be his partner. Together, they built something successful and honest. 5 years after that first shocking reunion in the mansion's sitting room, Daniel woke up in their little blue house, surrounded by love. Naomi was beside him, beautiful even with messy hair and no makeup. Down the hall, he could hear Lila reading to her little brother. He thought about the man he used to be, rich and empty and afraid to fight for what mattered. That man seemed like a stranger now. This man, husband, father, business owner, community member, this was who he was meant to be. Daniel got up and walked to the kitchen to start the coffee. Through the window, he could see Lila's swing hanging from the oak tree. The garden Naomi had planted was full of flowers. Their son's toys were scattered on the grass. It was a life full of ordinary moments and extraordinary love. "Daddy!" Lila appeared in the doorway, her little brother on her hip. "Can we make pancakes this morning?" "It's not Sunday," Daniel pointed out, "but it's summer vacation and pancakes taste better when we're all together." Daniel grinned and ruffled his daughter's hair. "You know what, little artist? You're absolutely right." Soon their small kitchen was full of laughter and the smell of pancakes. Naomi stood at the stove in her pajamas, flipping perfect golden circles. The baby babbled happily in his high chair. Lila set the table carefully, making sure everyone had napkins and syrup. It was loud and chaotic and absolutely perfect. As they sat around their small table eating breakfast, Daniel looked at each face he loved so much. His wife, his daughter, his son, his family. "What are you thinking about?" Naomi asked, noticing his quiet smile. "Just this, all of this." Daniel reached for her hand. "I'm thinking about how sometimes the best things come from the biggest mistakes." "What do you mean?" "I mean, if I hadn't been stupid enough to leave 9 years ago, I might never have learned how to fight for what matters. I might never have become the man you and our kids deserve." Naomi squeezed his hand. "Everything happens for a reason. Even the hard stuff, especially the hard stuff. It makes us stronger. It makes us grateful." Lila looked up from her pancakes. "Are you talking about grown-up stuff again?" "We're talking about how much we love our family," Daniel said. "Oh, that's easy. We love each other more than anything in the whole world." Lila took a big bite of pancakes. "And we always will, right?" "Right," Daniel and Naomi said together. "Good," Lila said matter-of-factly, "because families that choose each other are the strongest kind." Daniel smiled at his wise daughter. She was right, of course. They had chosen each other every day, through good times and hard times. They had built something beautiful from broken pieces. Outside their kitchen window, the sun was shining on their little blue house. Their swing moved gently in the morning breeze. Their garden was full of flowers that would bloom again and again, year after year. It wasn't the life Daniel had been born into, but it was the life he had chosen, and it was perfect. After breakfast, they would work in the garden together. They would play games and read books and make more memories. They would choose each other again, just like they did every day, because that's what families do, real families. The kind built on love instead of obligation, the kind that lasts. Daniel Whitmore had finally found his way home.